somebody asked, we've never had this question before, and I think it's a really simple answer probably, but I'll let you speak on it. Open Doors asked, what is the approach you have when mixing a record with a sample? Do you resist changing it much because it's already the way it's supposed to be? Do you just treat it like another instrument? The only couple of times I've done that, I've also been producing, so it's kind of sonically exactly where I want it to be. Do you just treat it like another instrument? Do you focus on it different if it's a song, drums and a sample, something like that?
That's a good question. I'm actually, let's keep it in Atmos territory now, because I'm remixing the Free Black album for Black that I mixed in stereo years ago in Atmos, and most of the tracks are a sample, drums, 808, and a vocal or two. And I'm realizing that you have to do a lot more work in Atmos to make that translate. And so there's a bit more work on the sample to be done to saturate it more and give it more body. Like it's not filling up the space as much as like if you had a bunch of synths that you could pan through an Atmos mix to give that. But in stereo, I tend to leave it where it's at from the producer, but that's not to say that like what I'm doing to the overall mix isn't affecting it in some way. I do attempt to put my VLCs, my tubes, or the Unfair Child on it to see if some extra tube love will make it feel a bit more full. Sometimes the sample rip isn't of high quality, so I'm trying to add in some of those lower harmonics, those fundamentals that might not be there. Are there drums in the sample? How am I treating the drums in the sample versus the added kicks and snares? Are they in phase? Are they flamming? Am I trying to nudge things just enough where it's not changing the feel, but I'm changing the phase of things to keep it knocking? What are the drums like in the sample versus the added? Are they bringing tone to the drums? Are the samples just reinforcing the knock and the tone comes from the sample? Are there enough chordal harmonics in the sample? One thing I did for this album, I was just talking about that Alex and I were mastering with Dale that I mentioned earlier. One of the samples, the bass line is in the sample only, and it's not really prominent. So once you get the drums knocking, the bass in the sample isn't competing with the drums enough. Like it's not. So I'm doing like a hyper low end EQ on the sample in order to get the bass to come out, and that's doing weird things with the rumbles and then the drums. Right. So there's issues there. But a lot of the times those things are sorted. I mean, Alex did his best. I just was trying to get the drums to knock even harder on this record. So we actually wound up going more, and I just got the master and it sounds incredible, more old school on that one, more like a Wu-Tang type mix where the drums actually aren't knocking and the sample is driving it. And we wound up coming to a point where I just wound up lowering the drums a bit and letting the sample be the leader with the bass, because the bass line was the star. I think I took a bad approach to that, or the wrong approach, not a bad approach, to that, where I thought the drums should hit more modern like the rest of the album. But this one was a different kind of beast. So I wound up treating the sample first and then like just supporting with the drums. So this is all just different approaches depending on what you're hearing, right?
Yeah, I guess it's figuring out, the short answer is probably, what is the sample doing in the song? Because if it's a full band, or it's got both percussive and chordal elements, or if it's got bass as well as high end, if it's a vocal sample that's answering the lead vocals, you're going to treat it slightly differently depending on what you do, what it's complementing, what it's how it's adding up with the track. So I guess it sounds like it's quite a range. I mean, the challenge with a sample is that you can't pull it apart. So you can't turn up the drums in the sample or turn down the vocals or whatever. So you're stuck with a certain amount of things. But yeah, that's interesting.
I would add on that note what you just said. Also, don't be afraid of splitting it into sections for different parts of the song, right? So if there's a lot of times the sample has a vocal in there and they're using like a background vocal, like a classic group 3-part harmony background vocal is used a lot in samples, right? Maybe when that part comes in, you put that on a new track and you dupe it and filter out only that important bit and see if you can massage that in there, or you treat that and you filter low end out of the second one. You can obviously use automation instead of, I'm talking about I like to split out more than I like to use automation on things like that, but you can do it however you want.
You got enough tracks in Pro Tools.
Yeah, but just consider section to section what the sample is doing, like Matt just said, and treat it accordingly. Just because you did it to one part doesn't mean it has to be done to the other part.
Yeah. That's a good answer.
Thanks for watching. Just a reminder, all of this content is free. There's no secret knowledge here. There's no Patreon. We don't read ads. We don't have sponsors. We're just trying to build a knowledge base. All that we ask in return is that you share it with somebody. Thanks so much.